My name is Kath, and I'm sure, I think I know most of you that are in the room at the moment. So I'm a consultant with SILT, and I've actually seen probably most of you at some of the previous hypothesis webinars. So it's great seeing everybody again today. Seeing as we are quite a small number today, which is actually quite nice, that means as we're going through, if you have any questions or comments or anything, you are welcome to put it into the text chat if you want to. But if you want to ask something, you're also welcome to unmute and ask, because there's not a big number of us here today. So it'd be great if you can just speak to me and unmute your mic. I'm just going to stop my video at this point. Right, so just to let you know that, you know, as things are in flux at the moment with Amatuba, and we updating and refining and changing and editing, so too will these slides hopefully change in line with the any edits or anything that actually changes within the environment. So if you come back to these slides and see something slightly different, don't get worried about it. It just means that we've changed something and we're trying to keep the slides and everything up to date and in sync with the functionality within Brightspace or Amatuba. So in this webinar today, we're going to be taking a look at 3 quick use cases for hypothesis. Then probably the most important thing that you really want to know is how to get a hypothesis into your course site, and then some other just sort of tips and tricks, good to know things. We're going to have a look at the hypothesis interface and the rich text editor. We'll also look at the importance of OCR within the context of PDF documents. And then we'll look at the different types of annotation and tags that you can actually do with hypothesis. So as I'm sure you're all aware, Hypothesis allows you to annotate any publicly accessible PDF documents and web pages. It allows you to create page notes and tags, and we'll be taking a look at that a little bit later on. It allows you to make annotations and page notes, and those can be private or what we call kind of public or visible to all the students on a particular course site. You can also reply to comments on annotations using the rich text editor. And you can also make use of the highlight feature, which is a personal study aid, because highlights are initially only private to the person who actually makes the highlights. And then we're going to take a look at how to assign a grade per student. And the grades that you assign actually integrate with grades. So in Vula, that would have been gradebook, and in Amatuba, it is called grades. So I think most people here are familiar with hypothesis. So you know that hypothesis makes reading what they call active, visible, and social. So active, it puts more purpose into the reading. So when students are engaging with readings or a resource or a web page, whatever you're using as your hypothesis resource, it adds that extra layer of activity. It also makes it very visible. So it raises the visibility of the resources, and it also makes it very social because it's a collaborative tool. Many people can use the tool at the same time and collaboratively annotate the resource, whether it's a PDF document or a web page. So effectively, hypothesis makes reading active, visible, and social. So you've probably used this before in your sites within Vula. And I definitely know some of you, I've seen how you've used it within your sites, but just 3 very quick and easy use cases for using hypothesis. So one of them might be to actually pre-populate questions. So there's a lot of different use cases, but we're just going to look at 3 in this instance, where you could have your resource and you as the lecturer or the teacher role or the site owner, as it's called in Vula, could actually go in and pre-populate your text with questions by adding in your annotations, and then the students would come in, have a look at the annotations you'd made, and reply or respond to those. So that's one way of using it, to actually pre-populate questions on your text your resource in advance. Another way to do it is to collaboratively build a glossary. So in your resource, you might have some particularly new or difficult technical terms, depending on what your resource is. So you could use it as a way to actually create a collaborative glossary. You could have students highlighting certain words and saying, what does this mean? And then you could have other students or yourself responding to those and providing short descriptive definitions. And then if other people thought that the description or the definition was not quite complete, they could come in and add additional information to that. And a third way to use it would be as a way to discuss student questions. So if a student was going through a particular resource and there were some paragraphs or sections that were quite complicated or complex or they didn't quite understand, you could let the students highlight or tag or annotate particular words or passages that were confusing for them and then discuss those and provide explanations. So I know quite a few of you have used it before. So I'm just going to, seeing as there's a few of us in this webinar, just pause and find out from people here. You're welcome to unmute. Any other ways that you've used Hypothesis in your particular sites that you would like to just mention to the colleagues that are here in this webinar? All right, Richard, I know you've used it quite extensively in some of your sites. Any other ways that you found really useful when you've used it in your sites?
What I've found particularly useful is a glossary type thing, very informally, that students just of their own initiative will highlight a word in an article that they may not understand all that well, and then they will provide a definition from Wikipedia or a dictionary or whatever. So that I found quite useful. Another thing that where it does get used in my courses is just students making comments on academic articles, providing their opinions, and then other students responding to those opinions. Yeah, that's pretty much how I've used it. It's not one of the use cases that I think is nice, that it doesn't really apply to me, but for example, in drama or in literature, using it for close reading of text. I know it does get used, not at UCT, but it does get used in other institutions in that way, and has proved very useful.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard, for that. Yes, so that's definitely one of the other use cases that I've also noticed comes up quite a bit, is the use for close reading. Absolutely. Thanks, Richard, for that feedback. Right, so we're going to take a look at how to actually add Hypothesis to your course site. So you're probably familiar how this works in Vula. So let's see how similar it is when actually adding it into Amatuba. So I'm assuming here that everybody so far has been able to get into Amatuba. If there's anybody here that has not yet been able to access Amatuba, you can either just put it into the text chat or raise your hand, and then we can follow up with you afterwards. But as you know, we've just got our name change that's been implemented, and that's been followed through with a new domain. So just to take note that this is now at amatuba.uct.ac.za. And when you land on the landing page, this will look very familiar to you. You will just log in using your UCT credentials via the UCT login button there, the blue button. So once you are on the home page, this is what it looks like. Yes, it does still say welcome to Brightspace when you get inside Amatuba. As I said, things are in flux and they're gradually changing. So you'll soon see that updated as well. So once you're on this initial page, because Hypothesis lives within a course, you have to navigate to the course where you would like to implement this tool. So remember, there's two ways to get to your courses. Either you can use the cards that are on the front page, or you can use the course selector at the top, which looks like the waffle. Some people informally call it the waffle icon. That is your course selector, and that course selector will actually give you the full comprehensive list of all of your courses that are aligned to your profile. So once you have jumped into your course site, the selected course site where you would like to implement Hypothesis, you are going to add this to your content. So you do need to go to content on your navigation bar. So once you're in your content, this is just a very basic look at the content. You can see here there's one unit on the side called lessons. It's just been titled lessons. It wouldn't be titled that by default. You would need to go to add existing. So that is a blue button you'll find on the right-hand side at the top. You will click on add existing, and then a window will pop up asking, what would you like to add? And you are going to select the option that says external tool activity. Now at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that I've actually put a URL there that goes to the hypothesis guide, and all of these instructions as to the step-by-step procedure for getting it into the Amatuba environment, they are captured there in that guide as well. So the first steps are to click on add existing and then select external tool activity. Once you click on that, you will see a window which says insert an external learning tool, and you will not see it listed here as you would have done in the Vula environment. What you have to do is scroll down to the bottom of this window, and you have to click on the button that says create new LTI link. Once you've done that, you will see a window which appears with some fields that need to be completed. So the first field to complete there is title. So what would you like to title this particular reading that you're going to be adding in via Hypothesis? The next thing you have to add in is the LTI URL. So that is the special link. It looks like a web address that links Hypothesis. And this is a standard one that you would use all the time. So you can see it lms.hypothesis/LTI launches. That gets placed into that field. And then the next drop down, as soon as you've put in that LTI URL, you'll see that the drop down under tool will automatically select Hypothesis. So you don't need to select anything from that drop down. And then the last step there on this window is to click on create and insert. Once you've done that, you'll be taken back to your content page. So you can see we're back in the content area within Amatuba, and you'll see that it has this message on the page there that says open link in a new web browser tab. So most people usually like to have Hypothesis visible on the page. So in order to do that, we go to the three dots at the top right-hand corner and select edit from the drop-down. Once you're on the edit page, you will see under display options, there is a radio button where you can select to embed on the page. So that will make your Hypothesis tool visible on the actual page. So select embed on the page, and then right at the bottom, you'll see your blue button that says save and close. So as you would suspect up until this point, what we've done is we've effectively added the Hypothesis tool. So we have not yet added the actual resource. So this is where you'll be presented with three options as to the resource that you would actually like to add into Hypothesis. So you can see here, we have the URL of a web page or PDF. You can also select a PDF from Google Drive, or you can select a PDF from OneDrive. So these are the three options you can use to source your document or your web page that you would like to annotate with Hypothesis. So the first one we're going to do is just enter the URL of a web page. We're going to use that as an example. So if you select that option, all you would have to do is paste the URL into the field there. And just to note, as we said right at the start, that your resources, regardless if it's a web page or a document, they need to be publicly available or publicly accessible. So what that means is that the link that you provide there, anyone can click on that link and have access to that file without having to log in or create a profile or pay money. So there must be no intermediary step. You must be able to click on that link and immediately land on the resource. So then you know it is publicly available or publicly accessible. So once you've added in your URL link there, you click on submit. And then your web page would load. So you'll see here immediately it loads on the page because we selected to have hypothesis embedded on the page. And you'll also see that on the right-hand side there, the hypothesis pane loads in the open or expanded position. So it looks like it's covering the resource initially, but you can always use that little icon, which is highlighted there, that looks like a little chevron to the right, and that will make the hypothesis pane roll back, and you'll be able to see the full view of the web page. And I'm going to show you one other option as well. So that was a URL to a web page. What if we wanted to use a document? So let's use the option of selecting a PDF from Google Drive. So once you select this option, you are going to be presented with various different little pop-ups. So the first one they're going to ask you is, because you're connecting this now to your Google Drive, is which account would you like to use? So usually if you're using PDFs that are stored in maybe your institutional Google Drive, it would pop up with the option of your UCT email address. If you're using your personal one, then you would use your personal credentials at this point. So that's the first screen you'll be presented with, is which Google account would you like, where's that document sitting, which would you like to link to hypothesis. Once you've selected that, you're going to be presented with a second little pop-up screen, which says that Hypothesis wants to access your Google account. And you'll see something there where it says, this will also allow Hypothesis to see, edit, create, and delete all of your Google Drive files. Now that sounds pretty drastic because it sounds like Hypothesis is going to come in and delete files, and you're going to go back there and look for it, and it's not going to be there. It's not quite what it means. So it's not as bad as it seems. What it means is when you are linking to this document, because you're going to be effectively annotating on the document, and you might want to afterwards decide not to still have that document as a resource for annotation, it's got to, Hypothesis needs to have the access to be able to delete that file from the Hypothesis tool. So it wouldn't delete it out of your drive. It's asking for access to that file within your drive in order to be able to complete the functions that Hypothesis needs to do to provide the annotations and be able to delete it afterwards should you want to. So you do need to click on allow. If you don't click on allow, then that PDF document in your Google resources will not link up with Hypothesis. So once you've clicked on allow, it'll present you with two options. You can either select an existing file that is sitting in your Google Drive, or at this point, you can actually upload a PDF, and then that would go into your Google Drive. So if you would want to select one that's already there, all you would have to do is either search for it or find it. It gives you your recent ones that you've accessed, and select that file, and then click on select at the bottom of the screen. And once you're done that, you would see that your PDF document will arrive on your page, as we had already selected that embed on the page option. And similarly, you will see that the Hypothesis pane loads in the expanded position, but you can always roll that back using the chevron to the right at the top of the page there. So those are two options, using a file or using a web page. I'm not going to go through the third option of sourcing one from your OneDrive, but it's pretty similar. You would sign in, give access, and then select the document. Very similar to the procedure that you've done for a Google document. And just to let you know that when you go through this route of adding a Google document, whether it's an existing one or whether it's an uploaded one, it's already, because you've already given Hypothesis the ability to edit, etc., your files, it will immediately apply the correct rights to that file so that it is accessible to Hypothesis. So you don't have to additionally go in and do those usual sharing options that you normally do in Google Drive. Hypothesis will automatically do that for you on the selected file. Right, we're just going to go through a few things which are good to know about Hypothesis. And one of the things is getting to know what all these little items do, little icons do on the Hypothesis interface. So right at the top there, next to number 1, you'll see something that looks like 4 arrows. That is quite useful because that gives you an expanded view. So normally if you've worked in Amatuba, you will see that the area where you work with content is a fairly small portion of the screen. It doesn't take up your full screen. So if you're finding that a little bit small, you can always use that expand view icon at the top right-hand corner, and then it takes up your full screen, similar to when you're watching a video, for example, in full screen, and then you have the option to retract it back to the usual view. The second item there is the grading bar. We're going to have a look at that a little bit more in detail, but you'll find the grading bar at the top of the Hypothesis resource. And this is where the students that are aligned to your particular course would be listed. And this is where you could submit a grade per student. The hide or show annotation sidebar is something that we've mentioned. So remember, this Hypothesis pane rolls over the resource and you can move it in or out of view by using that hide or show annotation sidebar. And then the fourth item that looks like a little eye is when you are creating highlights on your resource, you can decide to show them or hide them. So using the little eye, by clicking on that, at the moment it's in the show position. If you click on it again, it toggles to the hide position and you'll see the little eye with a stripe through it. And the fifth icon down there is one which looks like a little page. So that is viewing page notes. So besides highlights and annotations, you can also create page notes. We're going to have a look at those a bit more in detail as well. And this is where you would access the page notes. And then at the top there, if you have been viewing a resource and there's been several other people also adding annotations as you're going along, you will see this little icon pop up that looks like a red circle with an arrow in it. That is alerting you to the fact that there's been new annotations since you last looked at the document. So if you see that and you click on that, it'll take you to the new annotations that have been added. The seventh one along there is a little magnifying glass. That is to search the annotations. You can also sort the annotations. There's a little up-down arrow, so you can sort it by different criteria. And then there is a help option. And the last one is your particular profile. And then at the bottom there, 11 and 12 is just showing you that there are, as we said, annotations and page notes, and you can use either of those tabs to see either all the annotations or to click on page notes and see all the page notes that have been added to the resource. So that is just taking a bit of a brief tour through the icons and the functionality that is available to you within the Hypothesis interface. And then looking a little bit closer at the rich text editor, when you are actually adding annotations or doing replies or doing page notes, you will see this rich text editor popping up. So you can see you've got a couple of options available to you. So at number 1, you can see you can bold some of your text if you want to. You can also have italics. You can have, the third one is block quotes. You can insert links to other files. That's the fourth one along. You can also insert images as well. You can also make use of math latex characters, so special characters and symbols if you want to. And then 7 and 8 shows you that you can have numbered lists or bulleted lists. Just an option there to also note that once you've added in your formatting, it doesn't show immediately, as you can see. It applies little asterisks and various other items. It almost looks like code if you want to around your text. So you can always click on preview, and preview will show you what it's going to look like. So here we've had some bold applied and we've had some italics applied. So preview allows you to see what it looks like. Then you click on write just to go back and carry on editing. And then at the bottom of that example, you saw another field that was added in. That is for tags. So tags are completely optional. You don't have to add them in. But if you would like to categorize similar or thematic annotations or replies or posts, you could use tags, because tags are searchable and it would be a way of bringing different annotations together that were all linked by virtue of a tag. So I mentioned at the start something around OCR, all right? So what is OCR and why is it very important within your documents that you're going to use within Hypothesis, your PDF documents? So if you've uploaded a PDF and you see this particular warning message at the top, it says this PDF does not contain selectable text. And then you'll see a link there. It says learn how to fix this in order to annotate with Hypothesis. So the bottom line is not all PDFs are created equal. So if they are not OCR, you will not be able to use them within Hypothesis. However, there are some ways that you can change this or rectify this and make sure that they are ready and able to be used within Hypothesis. So as you can see on the right there, that OCR refers to optical character recognition. So what it means is that the text which is on this document is machine readable format, and that is required in order for Hypothesis to actually interact with this resource. So how would you know whether your PDF is OCR'd or not? Because this could possibly be a PDF that you received from somebody else. So you didn't create the PDF, someone sent it to you and said, hey, here's a great resource, let's throw it into Hypothesis and use it. And then you upload it and suddenly you get this message. So a quick way to check whether your PDF is OCR'd is to see if the text is selectable. So if you can easily select a line of text in the PDF document, and then you can copy it and paste it somewhere else, anywhere else, like onto Notepad or Word, and the pasted text is properly formatted, then it means your PDF is OCR optimized and you can start annotating. So conversely, if your PDF was not OCR'd, you would not be able to select text, or you may be able to select certain parts of text, but when you pasted it into another environment, there were either characters missing, or it was garbled, or it was looking like it was in a different font. So you must make sure that your PDF has selectable text. So one way to create a PDF document that will be OCR compliant is if you've already created something, say, for example, in an Office document, say you were typing something up in Word, or you'd created a resource or an outline in Word. If you go save as PDF, then that will create a PDF that will work within Hypothesis. So that's all well and good if you are the author or the source of the document and you are able to actually save it as a PDF. That will create a compliant PDF. However, if you get something, as we said, maybe someone's given you a resource and it's not compliant, then there is a way that you can actually change it into OCR. So there's a URL you can see here. It's called docdrop.org/OCR. And it gives you it's a web-based tool that gives you the facility to take any non-OCR PDF and drop it into this tool, and it will convert it for you. There are very slim chances that not all documents might be able to be converted. It depends what is actually on the document, but most of the time this tool is able to actually make your PDF, your non-compliant PDF, into one which is OCR ready for Hypothesis. So essentially go to this URL, you drop your PDF document here, and you click on the Run OCR button at the bottom left-hand corner. Once it has run the OCR, depending on how big your document is, it'll then present you with a download link, and you can download that particular version of the PDF, which is then OCR compliant. And if you do the test, as we said, which is to swipe over the text and see if you can paste it somewhere else, then you'll be able to see that this document has now become compliant, and you'll be able to use it without any issues within Hypothesis. Right, I'm going to pause at this point and just find out if there's any questions up until this point before we jump into looking at the different annotations, page notes, replies that you can do with Hypothesis. Any questions up until this point? Yeah, Richard, go for it.
Hi, Kat. Sorry, my internet line dropped somewhere in the middle as you were kind of explaining the create new LTI link from then on. So I missed a little bit, and I will catch up. But could you confirm that you don't have to use Google Drive? You can link to a file that's in the file manager in Brightspace?
So remember in Vuller, you could do that.
Yeah.
And remember when you did that within Vuller, the step that was very important was you needed to go in and edit the properties on that file within Vuller. I'm talking about the Vuller, and make it, yes, absolutely. So that facility or feature doesn't exist within Brightspace. So the options that you have with using Hypothesis within Brightspace or Amatuba is to use the web link, the publicly accessible web link. But if you wanted a document, it would have to reside either in your Google Drive or in OneDrive.
Okay, so Google
so you can't, okay. So you can't use a local file because that is essentially behind a paywall, even though Hypothesis itself is within the same environment. I think you've also experienced before that kind of perpetual loop that exists when Hypothesis has to try and access something which is sitting behind a login. So it would be seen as behind a login. So we can't use local files within the Amatuba environment. It'll have to be Google Drive or OneDrive.
Okay. Thanks for that. And then my other question is, can you set, when you embed the LTI link, can you set it to open in a new window? Because there's this problem with the Brightspace or Amatuba interface taking up too much real estate.
Yes, so
there is the expand view. Students don't know about that.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's
there is an option, yes. So once you've actually added the tool itself, you can go into the edit options. There's 3 little dots at the top right hand corner, and when you're in the edit options, there's 2 radio buttons. The one says embed on the page, and the other one says open in a new window. When you initially add the LTI tool, the default state is for it to open in a new window. So if you prefer to use that option, then just by adding the tool, it will by default be the open in new window option. But you can choose either of them, yes.
I would recommend for anyone who is using it, who doesn't tend to use Hypothesis, to go with the open window option. It should be the default because, yeah, it does create serious usability issues for students.
Yeah, so you're saying that especially when the right-hand pane is like expanded and sort of covering part of the resource.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so also just to remember as well is that when you're actually creating something within the Amatuba environment and you sort of composing the content as a lecturer you see a quite a small view. And when the students actually view the resource, they have a very, very different view. And for them, it actually opens up the kind of the interface, opens up kind of full screen, and even the navigation pane, which is usually on the left-hand side, which gives them the ability to move between the different pages, if you want to think of it like that, or the different content within a unit, that is immediately in the rolled back position. So the students actually get a much better view than when you're actually composing it, and kind of by default get to see a full edge-to-edge kind of spread of the content. But definitely you're welcome to also open it in a new page, because that will also give you the full edge-to-edge spread as well.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard. So we're going to take a look now at annotating with Hypothesis and what are the different things that you can actually do. And I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with these. So the first one is, of course, annotation. So annotation is where you're going to be swiping over text, and that's why we said it's so important that your resource, especially PDF resources, are OCR, sorry, so you can actually swipe over your text. So you would select your text that you would want to annotate, and then a little pop-up would appear saying annotate or highlight, and you would select the annotate option. It would then open the pane on the right-hand side, and it would have the text that you'd highlighted there, a contracted version if you'd highlighted a huge big paragraph, and then you would be presented with the rich text editor that we've just taken a look at a little earlier on, and you would type in your annotation there, and you could use those formatting options if you wanted to. It's not mandatory, it's completely optional if you would like to use those. And then you can also remember to add tags. So remember, we said that tags are completely optional, but they are searchable, and it gives a nice way to actually categorize similar thematic annotations. So tags could be added. And then the last step would be to actually decide who you would like to post this to. So annotations can be private, and that would be the option where it says post to only me, or you can decide on the drop-down list to post it to everybody that's in this particular course site. So that would mean lecturers and students would be able to see your annotations. So you can decide who you would like to post it to, and then just post that through. You can also come back afterwards. So for example, you'd posted something privately where you'd actually meant to send it to everybody. You could always come back, edit your annotation, and change and post it to everybody. So as the name implies, if it's only private to you, only you will see it. If it is available to everybody in the site, that means other people can see it and respond and comment and reply to it. So sometimes people do an annotation, they mistakenly make it only private to themselves, and they wonder why they're not getting any responses or comments or anything, and then they suddenly realize that they've actually not posted it to everybody. So you can go back, edit, and post it to everybody, make it visible to everyone in the site. So here you can see you effectively just going to swipe over the text, you're going to pop in your annotation, and then you can see that you also have the option to edit or delete or respond. So you just select annotate and then go into the text field, add in your annotation, and post it through. Just to let you know, we often get people asking, does Hypothesis provide alerts when new annotations are added? It does not. So it's not going to send you alerts if you're not in the Amatuba environment. So you do need to check back often, especially if you set some kind of assignment or ask students to do some kind of contribution or replying by a certain date. You would need to check back fairly often within the Amatuba environment and look at the resource to see the new annotations that have been provided. Then you also get page notes. So page notes are, as the name implies, places where you can add information, but it's not necessarily linked to actual text. So you saw with the annotation is where you swipe over text and you write a comment pertaining to that particular selected text. So annotations would be more general, kind of high-level comments that would essentially pertain to it could be to the entire resource or to a particular chapter in the resource, but it's not aligned to particularly highlighted text. So you would get to the page notes either using the little icon on the side that looked like the little page, or you could use the tab at the top that says page notes, and you would type into the similar rich text field, and then you could also again decide to post to only me or to make it visible to everybody in the site. So again, you can also add tags if you wanted to. And you'll see that at the top there next to the tabs that say annotations and page notes, it tells you on this particular resource how many annotations have been made and how many page notes. So the little number would increase by the number of page notes or annotations per resource. So if you had posted to everybody and not to only me, you would have the facility to see annotations and page notes and be able to respond to those. So the icon there next to number 2 that looks like a little backward arrow, that would be where you would respond to a particular contribution. So you would just click on that, the little rich text editor would pop up, and that's where you could enter your text. And you could or not, if you wanted to, add tags and then decide who you would want to send that reply to. If you're replying to something that's been visible to all, it kind of makes sense to follow through and also reply so that everybody can see the response, but you do still have the option of posting only to me and making it just visible to yourself. And just to note that you can actually go in and delete using that little bin icon, but obviously those are only on annotations or page notes and replies made by yourself. So you obviously don't have the facility to go and delete other people's annotations, but you can go back and edit or delete anything that you have contributed. So here's an example of just being able to click on reply. You'll get the little rich text editor popping up. You can put in your text and then just post it through. Another feature is highlights. So highlight, as the name implies, will just add a light yellow highlighting over the text. And essentially highlights are a study aid. And by default, they are private and only visible to yourself. However, as you've seen on the previous slides, you can actually go in and edit anything that you've actually contributed. So if you had previously used highlights and they were visible only to yourself, and then afterwards you thought, well, actually that element that I've highlighted, that's pretty useful, I think I should draw everyone's attention to it, you could go back to your highlight and you could actually change it into an annotation and then post it through to everybody. But initially, by default, highlights are personal, just for you, just visible to you. And remember, there's also an icon on the interface where you can hide and show the highlights. So when you are grading the contributions, just to let you know that the grading is per student, it's not per annotation. So when you are grading, at the top on the grading bar, you will see a drop-down list where it will list all the students that are currently aligned to this particular course. So in this course, you can see it's just got 3 students listed there, but you might have quite a lot more. So as soon as you'd selected a particular student from the drop-down list, you'd be able to see all the contributions from this particular student. You could then go through and review these contributions and then provide a grade at the top out of 10, and then click submit grade, and this would go straight into the Amatuba grades or the Vula grade book. So it does integrate really easily with grades, and you can come back and actually edit here as well. So if you'd previously given somebody 8.3, you could come back again and change that really easily to something else, and it would update it automatically in grades for you. So it does take full numbers, or you can also use points, decimal points, but not commas. So it's as easy as selecting the student name from the drop-down list, adding in a grade, and then clicking submit grade. Right, that was quite a whirlwind tour through all the features of Hypothesis. Thanks, everybody.